Welcome, students. To understand the grand narrative of global economic history, we must begin not in the palaces of kings or the ledgers of merchants, but at the very origins of settled life itself. Our story starts around 9000 BCE, in the Neolithic Revolution, when humanity made the monumental shift from nomadic hunting and gathering to agriculture and permanent settlement. This shift laid the foundational stones for all subsequent economic systems. Today, we will explore two of the world's most ancient and revealing proto-cities, Jericho in the Jordan Valley and Çatalhöyük on the Anatolian plain. These were not cities as we know them, but they were the first experiments in dense, settled human life, and their economies represent the very prototype of organized production, trade, and social complexity. By examining them, we can decipher the economic DNA that would later replicate and evolve in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and beyond. We will journey to the walls of Jericho, not to see them fall, but to understand why they were built. And we will navigate the labyrinthine dwellings of Çatalhöyük, to see a unique economic model emerge, one based not on central authority, but on the household. Let's begin with the older of the two, Jericho. Situated near a powerful perennial spring in an otherwise arid region, Jericho's location was its first and most critical economic asset. Water was the ultimate resource, enabling the cultivation of wild grains like barley and emmer wheat. This led to the first pillar of its economy, subsistence agriculture. However, Jericho's true economic ingenuity lay in its development of what we might call resource capital and public works. The most striking evidence of this is its famous stone wall, dating to around 8000 BCE, and its massive circular stone tower. The construction of such monumental fortifications implies an astonishing level of economic organization. It required a surplus of food to feed a non-farming labor force, a system of collective decision-making to plan the project, and a division of labor to execute it. This was not a small village project, it was a coordinated economic endeavor that channeled communal resources into infrastructure for defense, likely of its valuable land and water sources. This represents one of the earliest examples of capital investment in history. Beyond its walls, Jericho's economy was already engaging in long-distance trade, another key marker of economic sophistication. Archaeologists have found obsidian, seashells from the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, and turquoise from the Sinai Peninsula in the layers of the settlement. Obsidian, a volcanic glass prized for making sharp tools, was not locally available. The nearest sources were in Anatolia, hundreds of miles away. This tells us that the people of Jericho were part of an extensive exchange network. They were producing something, whether it was salt, bitumen from the Dead Sea, or food surpluses, that they could trade for these exotic, high-value goods. This trade was not merely for survival, it was for acquiring status goods, tools for specialized crafts, and materials that enhanced the quality of life. It signifies the emergence of a concept of value beyond mere subsistence, where objects from distant lands held special worth, driving the engine of commerce and creating the world's first trade routes. While Jericho was fortifying itself, a very different kind of settlement was flourishing in southern Anatolia, Çatalhöyük. From around 7500 to 5700 BCE, this was one of the largest and most densely populated settlements in the world. A sprawling hive of humanity with a population numbering in the thousands. Its economic model, however, was radically different from what we might expect. There are no palaces, no temples, no central storage facilities, and no signs of a ruling elite or a centralized administration. Instead, the economy of Çatalhöyük was profoundly decentralized and household-based. The entire city was a vast agglomeration of mud brick houses, packed tightly together like cells in a honeycomb, with access gained through holes in the roofs. Each of these households was, in essence, a self-contained economic unit. The economic lifeblood of Çatalhöyük was a sophisticated mix of agriculture and animal domestication. They cultivated wheat, barley, and legumes, and they herded sheep and goats. But the key to understanding their economy lies in the evidence found within each individual house. Each household possessed its own storage bins for grain, its own cooking facilities, and its own toolkit for processing food and materials. This suggests that production, storage, and consumption were managed at the family or household level. There was no evidence of a central authority collecting and redistributing grain, as we would later see in Egypt or Mesopotamia. Instead, the economy thrived on what economists call household autonomy. Surpluses were likely created and managed by individual families, who could then use them for their own sustenance, for feasting, or for trade with their neighbors. This created a resilient, distributed economic network where power was not concentrated but diffused. Yet, this does not mean Çatalhöyük was a society of simple, isolated farmers. Evidence points to a highly sophisticated division of labor and craft specialization that operated within this decentralized framework. Certain households show concentrations of specialized activity. Some were clearly workshops for obsidian tool production, skillfully napping the volcanic glass into mirrors, projectile points, and blades that were traded across the region. Others specialized in weaving textiles, creating baskets, or working bone. The stunning wall paintings, plaster reliefs, and elaborate figurines found in many houses also indicate the presence of individuals with specialized ritual or artistic knowledge. This specialization was likely facilitated through a complex web of social and ritual ties, rather than by command. The economy was embedded in the social and religious fabric. Trade and exchange were not purely transactional, but were part of building relationships, status, and a shared identity within the community. The contrast between Jericho and Çatalhöyük offers a fascinating glimpse into two divergent paths of early economic organization. Jericho, with its massive communal walls, hints at a society capable of large-scale coordinated labor, possibly under some form of leadership or collective council, that could mobilize resources for the common defense. Its economy was oriented towards securing and protecting its prime resource base and engaging in long-distance trade for prestige items. Çatalhöyük, on the other hand, presents a model of what we might call a bottom-up economy. Its scale and complexity emerged not from a central plan, but from the aggregation of thousands of autonomous household units, cooperating and trading through social and kinship networks. It was an economy built on micro-surpluses and horizontal exchange rather than macro-command. A critical economic and spiritual resource for both settlements, but particularly for Çatalhöyük, was the practice of long-distance trade in non-essential goods. We already mentioned Jericho's obsidian, but at Çatalhöyük, the obsidian trade was an industrial-scale operation. The city was located relatively close to one of the best sources of obsidian in the region, and its inhabitants became masters of working this material. They produced vast quantities of tools and weapons that were exported, making Çatalhöyük a central node in a pan-regional trade network. Furthermore, they traded for other exotic items like Mediterranean seashells and flint from Syria. The acquisition of these goods was not just about utility, it was deeply tied to social and religious life. The obsidian mirrors, the leopard bone paraphernalia, and the wild cattle aurochs motifs found in their shrines all point to an economy where trade supplied the materials for ritual and status display. This illustrates a fundamental economic principle. Demand is not only for bread and shelter, but also for meaning, power, and connection to the cosmos. So, what can we conclude about the legacy of these first economic experiments? They demonstrate that there is no single right way to organize an economy. Jericho shows the early rise of collective, almost public economic projects for defense and stability. Çatalhöyük proves that large, complex settlements can flourish for centuries without overt social stratification or a centralized command economy, relying instead on household autonomy and a robust social fabric to facilitate exchange and specialization. Both, however, shared the crucial drivers of surplus production and long-distance trade. They moved humanity beyond a day-to-day struggle for survival and into a world of accumulated wealth, specialized skills, and interconnected communities. The economic patterns established here, trade routes, craft specialization, the management of agricultural surpluses, and the investment in communal and ritual infrastructure, would become the templates upon which all future civilizations would build. The end of these early cities is as instructive as their beginning. Çatalhöyük was eventually abandoned, likely due to a combination of climate change, overexploitation of the local environment, and perhaps the very social tensions that its decentralized model could no longer contain. Jericho continued, but was transformed by successive waves of new peoples and new economic models. Their stories teach us that economic systems are not eternal. They are adaptations to specific environmental and social conditions. The shift from the relatively egalitarian, household-based economy of Çatalhöyük to the more hierarchical, centrally managed systems that would follow in the Bronze Age represents one of the most significant transitions in human history. The seeds of kingship, taxation, and slavery were not present at the very start, but the creation of surplus and settled life made them possible. Thank you for watching this in-depth exploration of the first economies. If you found this lecture insightful, please support our channel by subscribing and leaving a like. It helps us continue creating this comprehensive series. In our next lecture, we will delve into a completely different, yet foundational, economic system, the command administrative system of ancient Egypt. We will examine how the pharaoh's state organized massive agricultural production, built the pyramids, and created one of the most centralized economies in history. Join us to see how economic organization evolved from these early experiments into a powerful engine of state control.